Today on the podcast, we have Sean Donaldson. He is the founder of Bearsteel Equipment. Sean, thank you so much for taking the time. It was great to hear from you on the most recent Teachers Roundtable. So I got to learn a little bit about you there. We're going to do a deep dive into your company, Bearsteel Equipment, its story. I want to ask you a ton of miscellaneous questions as well. But outside of that, can you give the listeners some background on who you are?
Sure. Uh, Appreciate you having me on. Thanks for that. So I guess the short version is I played football through high school, went to Kent State University, and played 4 years at Kent State on the offensive line. And upon finishing up college, I had gotten a degree in business because as most 18, 19-year-olds, you don't really have any idea on what you want to do. And so you just kind of pick a major sometimes. So, but I'd always known I wanted to do something in business. And so I got a job out of college once I was all done. And it was at a meatpacking plant. So I was a ham plant supervisor, which I think I mentioned briefly on the teachers roundtable. That's probably not a job I would exactly recommend, unless you like ham, that is. And so it wasn't I guess it was a good and a bad thing because it showed me in life what I didn't want to do. And ham plant supervisor was not on the bucket list. So I still really enjoy football, even though my career was over. The NFL, for a lot of people, it's not as easy to get there as people assume. I played with a lot of great athletes. And even then, like the best of the best of the best, it's hard to do. So I decided I was gonna go volunteer at a local middle school, coach football. We had an undefeated season, which was awesome, and that kind of propelled my interest in kind of the educational pathway. I had a couple people tell me, like, you should look into education. You're pretty good at this. So I decided to kind of drop the hand plate job and I pursued education. So I got my master's in secondary ed, and I taught and I coached football. So I coached for like 10, 11 years and had a good time doing that. Coached a lot of kids, a couple. I was fortunate enough to see them pursue not only Division I college. I've had one and possibly two. The second one is still he's still playing in college right now, but probably have a good chance of having coached two guys that made it to the NFL, which is also pretty hard to say. Uh, so I really enjoy coaching football, but as with most things, they come to an end. My kids started to get a little bit older, and uh, I decided to kind of put that aside. From there, like all my time was spent on coaching football, and I didn't really have a lot of time to focus elsewhere. I always had this itch, though, of wanting to kind of travel down the entrepreneurial path. My dad has always been an entrepreneur. He's done multiple ventures as I grew up. So for me, that was kind of just normal. But once I was done with football, I realized there was opportunities that came up, especially with COVID. Uh, COVID was a wild scene in education, and each school district in each state was different. In Ohio, at least our school district, because it was mainly, I believe, up to the boards. Our school didn't close. We didn't shut down. So, but what it was like an open campus. So you could come to school or not. It didn't matter. And with that, you pretty much had the ability to stay home. The only kids that we had in class were the kids that were forced to come to school because of their parents, which I applaud all the parents that made their kids come to school for that. So we had 30% attendance, and so I limited kids, through the whole year. But with that, there were some other opportunities that kind of presented themselves. I'm sure that you talked to a lot of companies. Their same origin story was started during COVID.
Yep.
Some have not made it past, 1.5, 2 years, which is unfortunate. I've been lucky enough to kind of keep going. I'll be in my 4th year here this October, which is quite a blessing. So, in kind of seeing as things developed, especially the home gym market, that became the explosion, and I think a lot of people realized I don't have to go to a commercial gym anymore. And a lot of us, I think, jumped on the opportunity to maybe make a dent in and try to push innovation forward, I guess, if you will. So that's kind of how the whole thing started, where I think I found a couple opportunities to make some pretty unique items. And I'm still teaching, so that's still the full-time job. And this is the every hour in between job. So it's been a blessing, to say the least. And I appreciate everybody that's been a supporter. It hasn't been easy. It's been tough, especially going to trade shows by yourself. That's a lot of work to do. But, this is kind of where we're at. And it's been a lot of fun.
Sounds good. Well, let me stop you there. We're gonna dive into that for sure, but let me ask you a few other follow-up questions to your history. So you mentioned, I wasn't gonna bring it up, but you mentioned NFL. Most people understand they're not gonna make the NFL, but when did you realize that you weren't going to make the NFL?
Probably going into my senior year. The problem, the one thing that I noticed is that if you're injured, you're a liability, and they're making it like you're not getting drafted per se. Yes, like it's they're drafting you, but what they're really doing is they're making an investment in your ability to perform. And if you're hurt, like, your ability to perform can be extremely diminished. So my career was riddled with injuries. My freshman year, I came out unscathed. Going into my sophomore year, first day of spring ball, I tore my MCL and suffered a pulled groin. And so they shampooed the turf carpet in our indoor facility the night before to clean it. And we had different types of like turf shoes to wear. You had wet turfs and dry turfs. Well, they failed to tell us that they washed the turf the night before. And so, like, you got to remember, this is like 20, actually it's exactly 20 years ago from my freshman year. And we still had like the old carpet, like Thunderdome type of turf. And so we were doing one-on-one drills, and I caught a bull rush, and I had no grip. And so my knee buckled, and then it flared outwards. It was nasty. And I was slated as a starter at that point in time. And so spring ball sets the depth chart for the fall. So it was a struggle, and I battled. I came back in the fall and battled. And going into our game against Navy, I think it was like maybe the second series of when I was in against Navy, I went to cut a guy, and he fell down, and then a guy came over top and stepped on my left hand. So I was playing center, so I'm right-handed, but then my whole hand swelled up. I thought I broke my hand. Mm-hmm. And but you can play through that because it's not your dominant hand, so you're fine, especially as a center. We got through halftime, about the second or third series at Navy, and this is a game where we're talking like it was within 3 points. They'd score, we'd answer, and it just kind of volleyed back and forth. We ran a standard zone play, and I'm running to reach the guy, and I hear like a pop in my foot. And I all of a sudden I can't walk. I thought maybe I got stepped on again. Whenever we punt, I head off to the sideline, and I go back out, and I'm like limping, and I have like this fire in my foot, and I had to do something that I don't like to do, and this is the only time I actually pulled myself from a game. Come to find out, now I've got a left foot that I can't walk on, and a left hand that I can't grip with. And then they hand me crutches. So imagine what that was like, trying to crack yourself with what you think is a broken hand and a broken foot on the same side, crutching yourself out of the facility. It looked like something that you see at a freak show circus. So I ended up breaking my foot halfway through the year. The hand was okay; it was just a deep bruise. But I broke the foot and missed the rest of the year. I had to get surgery. So I ended up with surgery on my left foot and missed the rest of the season. Going into my junior year, I was okay. We had a pretty good year, 6-6. But for Kent State, like we've always struggled. It's been a battle there to have good football. They've done well recently, but it's always been a struggle. But I did suffer a sprained ankle that I played through with. That now that ankle is also permanently swollen, and it was on the left-hand side. So I've had a lot of injuries on the left-hand side of my body. Going into my senior year, spring ball, we were running a bubble screen. So on a bubble screen, the guys on the play side, they'll flare out and kick out, and then the guy that leads through. So I was on the back side of the screen, and your responsibility is that you're the bubble guy. So you would delay, and then you come back around, look for that's your kill shot, right? So that's the decleater shot. So I had a decleat shot, and the guy saw me the last second and gave me a good swim move. And he hit my shoulder just the right way. And when I hit the ground, my whole shoulder dug into the ground, and I could hear all the tendons in my labrum tear. And so everything just ripped, and my whole arm went numb. So I ended up having the torn labrum. I played through it through the rest of spring ball and into my senior year. So it ended up with surgery. So when you're filling out all the paperwork to the NFL, to get back to your original question, you have to list every injury you've ever had. And mind you, in high school, I also had a broken hand, and I had 2 lower stress fractures in my back. So I'm riddled with injuries, and they want all that information. And, not to mention, if your team is not very good, the chances of NFL scouts coming to see players, that lowers as well. So, we didn't have a lot of success in terms of our record, even though we did beat Iowa State opening up. But it's a tough world, and you have to be able to come out unscathed in many ways to get a look. But a lot of guys, that was their only dream. I had one of my former players, actually, he's a tight end there right now. When he decided to commit to Kent, I told him, I said, now listen, here's what's going to happen. The first day you're going to get there, everyone is going to tell you, I'm going to the league. I'm going to the league. I'm going to the league. And maybe if you're lucky, 6%. So maybe not even that. Maybe it's like 2% of the people on that team will get a shot. Drafted, especially where we're at in the MAC, not as likely, but at least he'll get a shot. And I saw him after the first season was over. He said, "Coach, you're right. Everybody said that was their only goal, was to go to the league." And it's just not. You have to be a special player in order to do that. And yeah, there's your anomalies every once in a while, but that wasn't something that I was so hung up on. I was just kind of grateful that I had what I felt was a decent career. It wasn't a great career, but it was a decent career. Had a lot of experiences, opportunities, and that was the thing. It really opened up more opportunities down the road than anything else. And I think the college football, man, there's nothing better than college football.
So you had a shot. That's awesome. That's very, very impressive. Yeah, tough. Sounds like a tough career. Sounds like my Division III football career, actually. You are teaching entrepreneurship. Has that always been your what you've been teaching?
No, I taught a variety of classes, from like your basic computer app stuff to like personal finance and just some kind of basic business 101 type classes. It's only been in the last probably 4 years where that's been more of a push. We're seeing, there's this trend right now. I brought it up at the round table too, the last time we all spoke. I think it's like 56% of Americans right now, I think, all have like a side hustle. And Some might call like this a side hustle. I don't know if I would necessarily agree with that, because it is something that I'm trying to turn into that's a lot that has potential. Will it ever get there? I don't know. It depends on the support from, everybody else. And so long as I can continue to kind of churn out craftsmanship and quality products. Um, but there's a lot of people that are doing things like this. And, but I'd always wanted to own something, whether that was like a gym, but that was something that I realized that was more of a 24/7 type of gig where there was much more activity needed. Like you really needed to be there. You couldn't do one job and then do that. It just wasn't feasible. So I kind of fell into the e-commerce world and realized that that was kind of the best route to go, especially with the fact that COVID was in high gear. Like that made the most sense. And it allowed me to kind of have a nice, steady balance between the two. So I would say I probably more fell into it than anything else, but it seems to have a good workflow to it. It's just I'm still busy and still fulfilling a lot of orders, but uh, overall, I would say that it probably gives the best of both worlds.
Well, diving back into the founding of the company, so you mentioned I don't remember if you said it on the teachers roundtable or what, but you've mentioned that it was kind of born from like your own home gym experiences. Like you were working out in the home gym, you discovered some needs, but I don't think you really dived into specifics. So I'd love to hear like what were the how did you come across these issues, and then what ultimately made you go towards this, and then maybe what did like that first 6 months look like?
Some of the things that I had realized, and it really started with like the cable stack. Uh, I had this old hoist 2-to-1 functional trainer that was kind of like my first true cable machine, and it didn't have a very big stack on it. I think it was 150 pounds. You're maxing out at 75 pounds, which isn't a lot. And I was contemplating selling it, and I had seen that there was some other type of like weight pins that were available on the market, and I didn't find them to be effective. And like they kept falling out, and which is obviously a safety hazard and an annoyance. So I remember at one point in time, I actually had a bungee cord strapped to the main the main cable attachment, just to prevent the thing from falling out. And I remember I was standing there looking at it. I was like, "There's got to be an easier way to do this." And I realized like it was magnets. So I called around, and it's your kind of your typical thing where I called around to a bunch of fabricators and machine shops, and I said, "Hey, I think I got this idea. Are you interested?" Most of them said no. And because they were so busy as well, they were like, "Look, we don't even have time. We're 6 months behind." But I've also kind of realized too, there's like just your fabricator or machinist in general. Most of them, I would say, they're building stuff for heavy duty machinery. They're doing stuff for industry. They're building foundations for buildings. They're doing railings for staircases that go into these industrial buildings, or stairwells, things of that nature. Most of them are not saying like the next big ticket is the home gym market. They're just not that. They don't have a need for that. But I called around to like 10 different places, and I finally came across a guy who, believe it or not, lives like 6 minutes. His shop is like 6 minutes from my house. And I called him up, and he's like, "Yeah, come on over and we'll talk about it." And so we ran through a couple prototypes. And the first one I thought about was, I thought, well, if the magnet strength should be equal to the number of pounds that it should hold. And boy, was that incorrect, because I found a magnet that had a 150-pound pull. And so once you put it on there, you need 150 pounds of force to pull it off. that was a
Mm.
wild experiment. So when the first time I put it on the machine, like I was like, yeah, this is great. Like this thing's not coming off. Well, it almost didn't come off. After I had pulled the pin off, I had so much force, I actually fell backwards and fell into another machine and about shattered my elbow. So I was like, need to go smaller with strength on that. And we tried one at like 75, which was better. But, you know, in order for both men and women to use it, there had to be kind of a sweet spot where, you know, both genders were able to still perform their microsets or add weight and still be able to pull the darn thing off. So that was where I kind of came into the magnet strength of 21 pounds, where it was enough to hold and do the job, but enough also that pretty much anybody could pull it out of the machine. And from there, you know, I started to realize as well, you know, like, well, how can I make this more customized for the customer? Because I started to recognize all these machines, they're the pin insertion length, the width of the plate, they're all different. And some of them have holes on both sides and you can slide it all the way through. Others, like a Technogem or a Sornex, they don't. So they'll go about three and three quarter inches. They'll drill through and then that's it. They're not going all the way through. So the standard size that I had wasn't fitting for those customers. So from customer feedback, I started to realize like some of these aren't working for people. So then I started to offer various sizes. And then once that happened, it opened up a lot more possibilities. So from the stacked weight pin, went to the short stack, went to selector pins, the micro stacks, the stubby stacks. Recently just came out with the super stack. So just providing a lot of variety for customers. And then hooked up with York, have a nice partnership with York Barbell, and then have kind of dabbled in the barbell game, which is tough because that's already saturated as it is. But one of the things that I think is nice about the bars that I have is the knurling is next to none, in my opinion. And the prices, yeah, are a little bit higher, but I'm a one-man shop. So the investment and the risk on top of that is stressful enough on its own, but it's still early. Like I'm not even at 5 years yet. So I've got more of that long-term vision to kind of see how things are going to go. And I think we'll get there.
Was this your first kind of side business, side hustle that you launched, or did you tinker with other things in the past?
I was looking into doing, because around that same time, you know, Coop was pretty big with doing all the reviews, and you were as well. And there were a couple others, and I thought, well, maybe this is like I started writing. Just I was more writing just standard blog posts, and I was looking at like doing motivational stuff on top of strength equipment reviews or just my opinions on things. And that just kind of kept my mind active before, you know, and that was pre-COVID. So that was like 18 and 19 in the beginning of 2020. And then I thought, like, here's an opportunity because the whole morning lifter thing, that was kind of like my introduction into quasi entrepreneurship, if you will. You know, I got to talk about what I wanted to talk about, and it was going okay. I mean, it wasn't like, you know, the posts were flying off the shelf, so to speak. But I had a couple that were actually, you know, Google first page results, which was pretty neat. But then I kind of more or less abandoned that, or really just stopped really putting in the effort once the company started. And I realized, like, I think this is kind of the way to go. And you get the same amount of control is there, but now it's all the stuff that I'm bringing into the marketplace, I tend to use, you know, and I just I don't have the capital to go out and like build thousands of racks or do those types of things, at least not yet. So everything that I bring out has to be a conscious decision to be competitive and to help ensure that it will sell, you know, but The morning lifter thing has been more or less abandoned at this point. So it's all the focus is now on the company.
How did you come up with the name Bear Steel Equipment? You mentioned you kind of thought about different names. I'd be curious to hear not only like how did you come up with it, but what were some close second and third place.
So this was actually the first and only. I didn't actually
Okay.
uh, I didn't have another name. And when I started off with the original products, they were all in raw steel, bare steel. So I'll give you the whole philosophy behind the name too, because I put a lot of thought in this as to why it is, because I've had to explain this before too. So, um, I went with kind of this bone, this skull, this small theme, and the philosophy behind it was, a lot of the core products that I have, they're bare steel, and I use the skull because if you wipe away all of the bells and whistles, right, even of the human body, the core of what makes us us is our bones. It's our bone structure, and without weightlifting, this has been well studied. The more you strength train, the stronger your bones will be, especially in the elderly. If you strength train and you're an elderly person, I read this article. It was a fascinating study. The the chances, so we talked about the elderly and how strength training affects their uh their abilities for bones to break. And they use the example of, like, it's the old "I fallen and I can't get up," right? Somebody falls and they break a hip and they're like 79 years old. But if you're strength training, they said it won't exactly prevent that old person from falling. But it will do is greatly mitigate the chances that they break a bone, because when they're strength training, their bones are strong. And so when you look at a lot of these strength training products, you wipe away all the bells and whistles. The core foundation is steel, and it's raw steel. And then you paint over it, you add the bolts and the bells and the whistles. Same with us. When you strip away the flesh and the muscle, the core foundation is your skeleton, it's the bones. And how strong is your foundation? And that's kind of where I set the whole message from. And one of the reasons too, so that was the first part. And the second part was I wanted a little bit of a return to the golden era of bodybuilding, where there were no bells and whistles. It was, you show up, you lift, it doesn't matter what it looks like, and it still weighs the same. You put your work in, and then you went about your day. So I grew up with pumping iron. I grew up watching those and idolizing the Arnolds and uh, the uh, the bodybuilders of that time, the Mike Mensers, like those, the Lou Ferrignos, Franco Columbos, like those guys I grew up with. Like, it's just like you idolize them in many ways, and that's kind of where the foundation of this was. You watch pumping iron, and it's not like, wow, does Arnold have that new ergonomic lat pull down bar? It's like, no, you just pick the bar up and started moving away. Uh, I wanted to go back to a little bit more of a core functionality that ultimately helped people improve upon their own fitness, and in doing it in a productive manner. And that's why then I added, like, if you wanted the extra bells and whistles, we can add that for you. The Cerakote or the hard chrome, things like that. But that was kind of the whole foundation of it. And I kind of just fell into, like, the font and the skull logo. And when I looked at it, I was like, man, that really fits. And that was kind of how the whole foundation of the name was born. But I got lucky, I guess. I couldn't really find another name. I thought about using fitness somewhere in there. I just didn't think it flowed. I feel like the three names in terms of a company or a name of something, you go past like uh, three main aspects. Like, you don't want four different things in there: Bearsteel Equipment, fitness products. Like, I might as well write a dissertation at that point in time. So I wanted to make it known, kind of what it was about, but also leave enough interest and intrigue where people are like, I kind of like what that's all about, and then lead them on a discovery journey into kind of what the company was all about.
Very cool. Yeah, I didn't know you put that much thought into it. I really dig the name and the branding. It's very good. Going back to like your, that first year of business, can you tell me like what like did you make sales? Like was it like did it progress? I would just love to hear more about like what did that first year look like? How many products did you add that first year? Was it just the weight pin?
So we had some bars that I was drop shipping as well, and the bars were the barbells were supplementary to the core products, which still to this day it's the weight pins, it's the selector pins, it's kind of that the stacked pin series and the power pins. So that's kind of the core lineup. Um, the first 6 months, man, it was just kind of like I'll see what happens. And I remember the first time I was working with that machinist, and I said, like, let's try to do 20. Let's do 20 pins, and let's see what happens. And I think he thought I was crazy at first because he was like, what is this? I don't quite understand. And he's like, but I'll do it. Like, you'll pay me, and that'll be fine. So, uh, so I took him and I sold all 20 of them like that. And I
Oh,
came back and I was like, okay, gotta do 40 now. Turned right around, sold all 40. And then I said, okay, I need 60. Now I need 100. And so that first year, it was evident that there was a demand for this, especially because the benefit and kind of the uniqueness of it is that it's not going to fall out. You know, now the unintended consequences of using steel was it actually acts as an adder weight without anything else. So for example, your standard pin uh, that's 6 inches long, like this might look light on the camera, but it's anybody that's ever felt one is like, this is deceiving because it weighs a solid 5 pounds. I mean, it's thick. And that was the nice benefit of it was it allowed you because most of those play stacks are all 5 pound or they're all 10 pound increments. So you put this in there and now you have a 5 pound increment. So you can micro load, and then when you max out the stack, you have the abilities to actually add additional weight. So that was kind of an unintended consequence of kind of going that route. And the reason I ended up going really with Bearsteel was just to keep the price down. Um, I mean, I could hard crumb all those, but then it would jack the price up to probably where most people wouldn't be willing to pay for it. And that's why I decided, okay, well, I'll use the coating as an add-on option so that people that might live in South Florida or in Texas or, in the Northwest or the Northeast or in Ohio where there's a lot of humidity and you can get that heavy flash rusting, they don't want to deal with that. It's worth the extra, 50 to 75 bucks to say, okay, I'll just pay for it once and be done with it. And I don't have to worry about it rusting. But most people just buy their steel. And I've seen some photos where like it is the whole thing is like a brown rust. And even when you turn around the back, he's got the little 6-shooter magnums. It's got that kind of old school aura to it where it's like you can tell it's been used. And that was kind of the whole point where it was like, even when I was in high school, I vividly remember like, you go through a workout and you probably remember this too, Jake. Like you go through a workout and then you look around the gym and it's like dirty, rusty, and sweaty. And like your hands are brown from the cars but you feel like, man, I got something accomplished today. And that's one of the things like, that I always wanted to provide for others. That was kind of the whole philosophy of it was, it's not necessarily the flash and the flam. It was more about like getting in the work. And for a lot of people, they seem to have kind of latched on to that idea. but the first year, like it was a lot of interest. I kind of grew it, and I said, okay, well, if people are using a weight stack, like they've also got selector pins. But I've seen some, like I've gone to some gyms, like I was on vacation. What was it for the 4th of July? And I was at this gym, and I kid you not, I posted one of them on the Bearsteel page. They were using a lag bolt, like a deck screw lag bolt for a selector pin.
Nice.
Another machine had a screwdriver as the selector pin, and like I was speechless, And I even
Right.
gave the guy my card, and I said I'd love to help. And of course, I don't expect a phone call, but like that's kind of some of the stuff that I thought about early on, especially with COVID. That's kind of what brought on the selector pin was, the secondary marketplace was like a gold mine for a lot of people, and it was price gouging too. But you'd get these selectorized machines, and maybe there's an Allen wrench uh, as a selector pin, or there's no selector pin at all. So what I wanted to do was combine the two, and I said, well, if you're going to buy a weight pin, let's make your stack look nice and have it match, and you can pair it up with the selector pin, and you kill two birds with one stone. So we went into that, and then kind of realized as well that not every machine will properly take the standard weight pin, and so we cut one in half and used it as the short stack. So there's some low row machines specifically that front bar goes right in front of the plate, especially on like a lot of life fitness machines, for example. There's that foot plate bar that goes right in front. You can't put that plate, you can't put the pin in there. So we went with the short stack. From there, it kind of evolved into, well, okay, we have these two products. Well, how else can you make effective jumps? Maybe 2.5 pounds is too much. And so I went back to our guy and I said, like, how about we cut the short stack in half again? And we convert this into 1.25 pieces of steel, and you can just click them, pop them anywhere you want. And so that was kind of the evolution of it. And then after the micros, and this was a year and a half later, we came out with the stubby stack. So that was the more or less the short stack, but without the rod. And again, it just gave you the opportunity to make 2.5 pound adjustments. You could put them pretty much wherever you wanted. And that's kind of where we've evolved. And the next evolution of this has been kind of the super stack range, where if the 21 pounds of pull in the standard isn't enough, we'll go to 49 pounds and we'll give you a little bit more. That was another thing that I had realized, that not every plate on the selectorized machines are real crisp. Sidebacks has been the best machine that I've seen in terms of like tolerance. They're almost completely flush, and a standard weight pen of ours would work like a super stack on other machines. And there's just no play to it. Where other machines, I have one in my gym. There's a can't remember the name of it, but they have UMHW on the tops and the bottoms of the plates to avoid them slamming down. And so now you have this small little gap that affects the magnet ability to stick. But you put a super stack on there and there's no problem, so it helps give a little bit more aid to where there's some design issues with some of the other plates. But that was kind of the evolution of it. The first year, though, going back, sorry, I keep kind of going forward on it. It was more or less just an experiment, just to kind of see if I was on the right track. And on the overwhelming success kind of the launch and the support, I would say too, of so many people, that's what kind of allowed me to expand and kind of test some things out. I've had a few products that were bust. Killing the first product was one of the hardest things I ever had to do, but it's become easier to do. We all have to make those decisions sometimes.
No, that was a great story of the evolution. But and then back to like your Bearsteel high school workouts. I remember just like stained t-shirts, like the brown stained t-shirts. And then,
It was
you,
always on the back too on squat days, you knew, because especially like we would lift in the mornings before school. And so some guys like weren't as fortunate, like they'd be wearing their stinky workout shirt from the morning, and they'd have this big brown stain along, they always wore a white shirt too. And so you'd have this
right.
big brown stain from squats on the back. And it's like, well, okay, well, at least he did something today.
Yeah. And then I remember getting to college and I didn't really sink in until you explained that. I was like, no, that didn't happen in college. At least we had like a nice indoor gym, air conditioned. Um,
Colleges
cool. Yeah,
are much more they're much more pampered than a lot of high
yeah.
schools. But even I've even seen some colleges, like, you leave those doors open, man, that humidity will kill some of the product. But overall, yeah, most of them are. We were pretty pampered at Kent as well, but still experienced some of that.
Yeah, I believe it. I'm sure the Midwest summer workouts were difficult outside, but yeah, the weight room was typically pretty clean. What was I gonna ask? Oh, so that was a question I kind of had on my list. You kind of started talking about the products that didn't pan out. Do you have any specific stories of something that like, you had high hopes and just didn't quite work out?
The Mod Bar was the biggest one. That
Yeah.
one was a huge investment, and I had worked with Jason McKee on that because I thought he had an excellent idea, and I wanted to jump on it, and we went so much as to patent it, and the idea is there, but the problem that it came down to, especially making it here in the States, nobody will buy. It's too much. It costs too much. It's. I think the base price was like $350 at the time, and that was the Bearsteel version. And then you had Cerakote; it was double the cost. I mean, it looked sweet, and it
Hmm.
was super uber effective. But the problem, and I had seen others in the space had criticized it, was the fact that it was so expensive. The argument that I had tried to make was, number one, this was a fully machined bar, 100% machine, and it was down to the preciseness, and the effectiveness was awesome. I mean, it was a fully straight 48 inches. It was needle bearing. I mean, it was smooth, man. But it was hard to justify at $350 or whatever it was. And it was also extremely expensive to produce. And that's kind of what ended up leading to the death of it. There just wasn't, the demand just wasn't there. Even though so many liked it, everyone that had bought one was very glad that they had done so. But ultimately, the cost became the issue with that. And uh, I feel like, I think I had told Rob this from Vintage Weights. I think that bar was ahead of its time. I
Mm.
even took it overseas to see if they could do it. And by the time after shipping and manufacturing, um, it was going to be the same cost.
Mm.
So I couldn't sell it, and they couldn't find a way either to bring the cost of it down. So it's dissolved for now. That doesn't mean I won't bring it back at some point. Maybe if someone else has a way to kind of revive it, I'd be happy to listen. But that was what the biggest issue was. And even though you could do so much with it, like that was the other thing. It was, the ultimate goal was, it was to be able to replace pretty much every lap bar that you have. And that was kind
Yeah.
of the justification for the price. But again, doing it bare steel, one of the disadvantages was it was going to rust eventually if you were in an unfriendly environment. So, I battled some areas like that, but once I had gotten past the, like, this is my baby, I had gotten past that, and that's a hard thing to separate sometimes. I'm sure you've seen this too, Jake, with Home Gym Con. There are things that like you say to yourself, like, I wish they could just understand, and dollars and cents talks way more than most things. And so it was hard it was hard for me to be able to convince people like, hey, shell out $350 when they might say, well, I'll just go buy another barbell, and that was the battle that I was playing with that. And ultimately I had to kill it off, which was, disappointing, but it's the realities of business too. If products don't sell, it doesn't make any sense for you to keep them because you're just wasting money. You're hemorrhaging money at that point in time. And so I was trying to be more efficient, and I was trying to, listen to what the community wanted. A lot of them liked it, but it just didn't fit the budget. It didn't fit the environment for most gyms, it seemed like. So that was kind of what ultimately led to the demise of it.
It's, yeah, very cool product, but yeah, the price point was tough. And we can cut this next question if you don't want to answer it. You mentioned, you mentioned a patent. You've also mentioned like some early sales. I'd be curious to hear, like, have you made a profit each year? To like say like how much of a profit or anything like that, but I'd be curious to hear, like, have you grown it? Does it continue to grow? More specifically, like, are you surviving?
Uh, so, and I tell people this too, as most business owners will know, Jake, you could probably appreciate this too. It's complicated. And, so the first few years I pumped money in to grow the business. And so that was kind of the attitude of profits be damned almost, anything that was taken was just pumped back in. Like, it was, because having one product is nice, but I didn't feel like I could survive just off of one product. And so I was looking for, I was trying to find smart ways to slowly expand to where I could, and I think I did that, especially with the first lineup. And then as things have kind of established, I think I have at least a foothold. It's almost as if you were building a fort, right? Now, if you're going to build a fort or you're going to build any structure, you first, you got to dig the trenches, and then you have to fill those trenches and firm them up with the concrete foundation. That's kind of where I feel like I'm at right now, where at least I have a foothold, where I feel like I'm in a good place now, where the company is somewhat established. It's not totally established, because, one of the things is that some of the products that I have are a little bit more premium priced. And the reason being, they're American made. American made products are not cheap. And the craftsmanship I have on these products, it's not like the guy does it with his eyes closed. I would almost say that, like, the guy that helps me, he's almost a partner in many senses, because he wants to see this succeed just as much as I do. So any profit that's been made has been reinvested in. Recently, any additional profit is kind of just being put into, I'm just trying to build capital now, I guess you could say. So that's kind of the slow process. One of the people I always like to listen to on entrepreneurship is Andy Frisella of the Real AF podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he talked about how he grew first floor. You what?
He's so good.
Oh, I know. But that was like, the way he explained it made so much sense to me. And I was like, that's probably going to be the route that I'm going to be. And that was the thing. He always talked about, like, the long headed vision. And it's like, if you're playing in the short run, it won't work. So, and it took him 10 years, I think, before he finally was able to make a profit. I think he said in 10 years, he made like 56 grand. And entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. And that just as much, and so, like, a lot of people will say, like, that's going to be the big question is, well, like, how much money are you making? And you say, like, I haven't made any money. And the reason is because this is like, just like giving birth to a child, this is more conception. And you want to feed that. That would be like saying, like, your wife gives birth to a child and she says, well, like, I'm keeping all the food. And then the baby dies. It's like, okay, well, that's not going to work, right? So the food is the money that you brought in, especially starting off. So what do you got to do? You got to feed it. You got to feed it. You got to feed it. And I think that's why it seems to make sense for so many people, not to be reckless now. And that's the thing. You can't be reckless you got to be smart and getting past those early, like, uh-oh, I made a mistake. Like, those hard parts coming through, kind of that's your learning curve, which especially getting into like the patents, things like that, all the legal stuff. This is just incredibly, like, and many times you say to yourself, I'm in the wrong profession, where they're charging you, I had a consultation with a lawyer when we were doing these patents. I think I was charged $250 for a 30-minute talk. It's insane. So, doing those types of things, the problem is they're necessary, and within the strong foothold that I have now, I can actually take a step back and be like, okay, well, what makes the most sense to bring to market next? And I've had a couple of people say, like, why don't you bring in a rack? And I would jokingly say, like, how much capital do you have? And that's the thing. And not to mention, like, everybody's doing racks. It doesn't make sense for me right now to do a rack because there's not necessarily anything that I could add that would be unique enough to make it worth my while. And I don't know if that's necessarily my space, at least not right now, but at least now I can say, well, what makes the most sense to bring in next that can, help solve another person's problem, or just maybe make something a little better, something, for example, is just the triangle, the V-grip tricep attachment that I have. Everybody's got one of those in the gym. The problem is they're all universal. So I tend to make mine a little bit thicker. It's a little bit wider, and it's got a little bit better knurling on it. So I'm just trying to find ways that give a little bit more of an advantage, because the majority of my customers are men, not all of them, but the majority, and they're all kind of like me. They're looking for something that's just a little bit better than kind of what you see on Amazon for $17 to $20. And that's kind of where I'm looking at, maybe just making subtle changes that could have enough of an advantage to where people might say, like, I'd rather go buy from Bearsteel than to just go off and pick the Amazon basics, call it a day. It's not always going to work, but, trying to just be strategic now, which can be hard, especially when it's on your own. There's mistakes that are made, but ultimately, the key, as with any business, right, Jake, is to survive, I think. And that's what I've been able to do so far. And it's been very humbling, especially.
Yeah, that's actually the term I keep hearing, like, within entrepreneurship. It's just like, you got to just survive. It's not about like beating this person. It's not about beating them. It's about like keeping it alive.
Yeah, there was a great quote I had heard. I listened to this almost a business philosopher called, his name is Simon Sinek, and he talks about a lot of, especially how to manage within a company. And this was all during the morning lifting era where I'm looking at motivational stuff, but this one stuck with me. He said one important quote. He said, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And they buy the why behind it. And I found that to be so incredibly important. But also, he talked about how he went to go speak at two conferences, one for Microsoft and one for Apple. And he said that Microsoft spent pretty much all their time talking about how to beat Apple. And then he went to go talk to Apple, and Apple spent the majority of their time talking about how to help teachers teach and how to help students learn. And that's kind of the philosophy that I'm trying to take. It's not so much like I have to beat this company, that company. It's how do I help the next customer lift a little bit more, feel a little bit safer, give them a little bit more confidence, give them that extra 5 pounds that maybe they've been struggling on that plateau. That's kind of been the whole philosophy of what I'm trying to do, not just to bring out products to bring them out. It's to try to help that next person who's training, who maybe doesn't want to get up that day and does it anyway. It's just like so many of us.
Yeah. Start with Why is a great book.
Yes, it
Um,
is.
yeah. Um, you are, very, very busy teaching, doing this, family man.
Mhm.
Have you ever thought about quitting Bearsteel?
No, no. It's you just I just it's just about organization. That was the thing that like we talked about at the round table. Organization is key. That doesn't mean I'm always uh in terms of prioritizing time. Um Sometimes I just have to get things done, but a lot of times it's shipping products out until 11 o'clock at night. And that's the hard part where, the thing that the sacrifice is sleep. So there's been plenty of nights, 4 hours, 5 hours of sleep. Got to get up at 4 in the morning, work out, go to school, teach all day. Once school's out, then I'm dropping off boxes, I'm taking stuff to get Cerakote or hard chrome, coming home. Then the kids got activities all afternoon. And then, from 9 to 11, 8 to 11, whenever the kids go to bed, that's kind of the times where I can get some things done. But I also understand that, every great company has also had their humble beginnings. You know, Google, Apple, Microsoft, they all started in a garage. Under Armour started in, I can't remember the founder's name, but he started Under Armour in his grandma's basement. A lot of these companies, they all start in an apartment, in a garage, somebody's house. And like that's the thing. And it's to your point, like you just got to survive. Just got to survive and then make the next leap when you're able to.
So, how does everything operate? Are you doing everything like where are like your Made in America stuff? Where's the Made in America stuff being made? And like, are you shipping that, or like, I'd love to hear like, do you go pick it up and you do it all from home, or could you give me any information right here
Right there
in the basement?
in the basement. Yeah, that's where I'm at. So that's where, like, this is the staging area that I call it. That's where, and of course, that's like a bookcase. That's an old bookcase. Uh, but like all the American made in America stuff or stuff that's shipped to me, this is kind of where it all gets set up. So, uh, we use American made steel. The stuff that's made in America, it's American steel or American stainless, and it's made here, 6 minutes away. So it's made in Ohio. And the great thing is too is that the machinist that I have, he's got a lot of pride not only in his work, but he has a lot of pride in seeing these products, you know, being used by some excellent people. So, I always wanted to try to keep everything in America, and that was probably the first mistake as an entrepreneur, where you're like, it's the Jocko Willink, everything by God is going to be made in America. And then you find out like, no, that doesn't exactly happen. And that was, I think, the first kind of punch to the gut that doesn't always work, because not every, like if you want made in America products, then you have to pay made in America prices. And not everybody's willing to do that. And that's okay. It's not to say that everything made overseas is junk. It's not. They've, especially in China, they got a lot of good stuff, and they do a very good job of it, and that's okay. But to say that I want to keep as much stuff, because that's the thing. So when I look to bring a new product in, I always check first, can I do it here? And can I sell it at based on whatever prices that are there? If the answer is yes, we'll go for it. If the answer is no, then I'll go and look overseas. So that's kind of the hierarchy of decision making. Some products just don't make sense anymore. Like your lap pull down attachments, for example, they've got that market wrapped up so tight because they can just churn those things out the way rabbits are being born every year. They're so efficient at it. Um, if I tried to make, you know, like the Iron Legend handle, that close strip attachment, if I tried to make that here, I'd have to sell it for like $250. Nobody's going to pay for that. And those are the hard decisions that I've had to kind of make. I even question myself, like, am I a sellout for doing this? I don't think so. But like, it's hard to say, there are some things like even the magnets, for example. I called one of the highest producing magnet factories in America and I said, can you get me this style of magnet? And he said, nobody in the country makes that. And he said, the only way to get it is to go overseas.
Uh-oh.
And so like, there are just some things you just can't. American manufacturing it's come back a little bit, but it's still a dying breed. And a lot of companies overseas have taken it up. And then you have the geopolitical issues. You've got, all of that stuff. Like there's all those tough decisions that are being made, and there's no easy answer, and so it's not like it's just like, well, I can't do it here. Like, let's go overseas and just pick anybody. It's much more complicated than that. But overall, I mean, you still have to make a business decision, and in order to survive, you still have to give a quality product that people are going to buy and support. And a lot of times, most people have not given issue to the fact that some things are imported. So that was a good feeling to know. But I've tried to keep a strict quality control process, and that's hard to do at times.
Yeah.
But if I send a product out, every product that goes out comes through me. At least it's something I have on hand. And so if I don't feel like it's fitting the description, I'll boneyard it. And then I'll get another product to make sure that it fits the description. So, that's kind of the process of how this whole thing plays out. But like I'll just drive my truck down and pick up the stuff that I have and I lug it downstairs and pack it away, and it's all in its unorganized boxes, but I know where everything is. So, and then as orders come in, they're produced, as the orders are made. So that's kind of the whole process.
Cool. Good insights. Well, I think I've taken up enough of your time. Is there anything else? Let's just close this. But is there anything else you'd want to share or anything you want to talk about before we go? I'm good on time.
I'll be at the Arnold again. I'll be at the Arnold again this March, and I'll be at Home Gym Con. So looking forward to Home Gym Con, and I'm hoping to have some unique options set up. So I wanna get into some of the strongman sponsorships with you this year. So I'm excited once you get all that stuff figured out. But the power bars that I've got are due to be shipped pretty soon here. So that's a full 29 millimeter bar, and it's going to have the aggressive knurling. So those are coming in, and I've got a few other products on the way that I'm hoping will be able to make an effective training environment for whoever wishes to buy them. But that's kind of where we're at. That's kind of the plans for the next year, I would say. And the hard part is now I'm getting into the kind of the slow season. So like end of July to August is always slow because with being a disposable income company, it's back to school. So a lot of people, all their money
Right.
goes towards shoes and clothes and books and everything else. So, but if you don't feel like buying any of your school clothes and you want to spend all your money with me, I'll gladly oblige.
Yeah, I think that's pretty standard around the industry. Even like my website traffic goes down quite a bit. All right, well, cool. Great to hear your story. Looking forward to the next few products. Love your business insights. And again, thanks for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, Jake, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on.
You got it.